Hello everybody, welcome to Webinar Wednesday. My name is Martijn Lofvers. I'm the Chief Trendwatcher of Supply Chain Media. I'm also the Editor-in-Chief of Supply Chain Movement, the European quarterly magazine, and also a huge group on LinkedIn, over 50,000 members, bi-weekly newsletter twice every other week. And today we have a live webinar. In the next 60 minutes, we talk about supply chain leadership, and we will go through the top 28 supply chain executive Europe we have published recently. And these are interesting topics because we're living in turbulent times. And for this purpose, I have invited two persons. First, Lucy Harding. She is a partner and global head of practice of procurement and supply chain at Odgers. Lucy, welcome.
Thank you, Martijn.
Please tell me briefly a bit of your background, what you're doing, and what your role is in this world, and also the connection what we have.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. So as Martijn said, I'm a headhunter. So Odgers, we just rebranded. We were Odgers Berndtson, but now we're just Odgers, is an executive search firm. My role is to lead our supply chain and procurement practice. What that means is I recruit chief procurement officers, chief supply chain officers and their leadership teams, that kind of senior level leadership, and then across all industry sectors. Much of the work that I execute with my team is based out in Europe. And then I have colleagues in the US and in APAC that we would work with, obviously, to deliver searches into those markets. I've been with Odgers in this role 15 years today, actually. So time flies. Yeah. And then prior to joining Odgers, I was a recruiter in a boutique in the supply chain space. And my very early career after university was in procurement for Kodak, for those of you who remember Kodak. Yeah. And Martijn and I have probably known each other for, I'm thinking, maybe 10 years or so now. And I've attended pre-COVID some of the events you've held in Amsterdam, and also recall being an avatar during COVID in one of your events, talking about trends in the supply chain. So, really delighted to be working kind of alongside you, looking at and discussing leadership trends and talent across the supply chain. So thank you for having me.
Yeah, and by the way, for this purpose, we have done a recent survey among supply chain executives, and we'll discuss the findings later on in this webinar. All right, thanks. And next to Lucy, we have Sander Kroep from IG&H. He's manager of retail and products, and we have been working closely for the execution of the top 28 supply chain executive Europe. So that's your role. But Sander, something about your background?
Perfect. Yeah, thanks for having me here, Martijn. So my name is Sander Kroep. I'm a manager at IG&H, and I've spent the past years working with a vast amount of clients from various sectors, retail, food, logistics, and manufacturing, basically solving their supply chain challenges. So varying from supply chain strategy, network design, but also optimizing, forecasting, replenishment processes. As Martijn said, working now together already for a couple of years on the top 28 together, and I'm the driving force behind all the analysis that we will share with you today during the call. And happy and excited to share those insights.
Yeah, and there has been a lot of scraping of the internet and AI and that kind of stuff, and Gen AI apply to all this, but we'll get to this point. All right, some household remarks. So this webinar is recorded. It will be made available on YouTube within 48 hours. The PDF will be made available. So as an audience, you can interact with us. You have the chat functionality on the right-hand side. So basically you will ask, is it being recorded? Yes, it is. So if you have real questions, use the Q&A functionality down below. You see these small text bubbles. I will follow these questions. So if these questions are in line of the discussion I will be having with Lucy and Sander, I will ask these questions right away. If not, we have a Q&A at the end. So there's some more opportunity over there. If you still have questions, if you want to have an opportunity to talk with Lucy for a new job or whatever, or talk about AI and projects, you are welcome to sit down at table 1 in the virtual lounge. So after 60 minutes, you will be able to sit down. As of this moment, we will put off our camera. So as the audience, you can enlarge your screen and have a better view on the slides. So, all right. So this is a slide I show regularly. So basically, this is an overview of the topics executives are talking about in their quarterly earning calls of Fortune 500 companies. So the CEOs CEOs of large companies and sometimes CFOs are talk about these phrases. So the more to the right, the more importance and it's growing if you go up. So basically, some supply chain has been on this chart generated by a German scale-up, by the way. Supply chain has been on this chart since 2020 on the right-hand side. So supply chain is hot, also among CEOs in big companies, especially the American ones. And I have highlighted some phrases. Sander, so if you look at it, what is your remark? What's your vision if you look at it?
Yeah, so one thing that stands out for me here is that, well, the tariff effects and everything that's going on basically geopolitically seems to be fading rather quickly in the past quarter from the agenda.
Yeah.
And for me, it's quite remarkable, as I believe that we are still in turbulent times, that also the outlook is still rather uncertain. So I'm curious whether CEOs are having some false sense of security, perhaps, as to what the future is going to behold. So that's what really stood out for me here.
Yeah, and I see you're right. Tariffs is still on the right hand side, so that's hot still.
Yeah.
But tariff effects, I think companies think they have it under control, but uncertainty is still high. So that's it. And the other thing, AI is mentioned quite a lot, still growing, and even CEOs are there to talk about agentic AI. So that's remarkable in my opinion. Lucy, talking about you're more in the HR space, I would say. What's remarkable from your point of view?
I think the hiring freeze piece in the small and fading importance part, I think is quite interesting. And when we were chatting about this last week, Martin, I think we see two things at play here, because organizations are definitely hiring less. But they are still hiring. Otherwise, I wouldn't have a job, and nor would my colleagues. So organizations are still hiring individuals. But there's definitely pause for thought in terms of delayering organizations, looking at the structure and the target operating model, which means there are more people coming into the marketplace, that are being displaced and leaving organizations. And I think there's a little bit of a pause and consideration for what the future target operating model might look like, particularly in larger organizations. So there's not that much pace behind organizational hiring at the moment. There's a lot of reflection, a lot of pause. If there's an opportunity maybe just to wait and do nothing, then we're seeing clients doing that, whilst I think they're waiting for external factors to settle, particularly in Europe. Obviously, we're in a kind of a low growth economy across many European countries. And then you overlay that also with the potential for the changing shape of roles and responsibilities as we integrate technology and AI. It's just slowing down that hiring momentum, I would say. So organizations are still hiring, but there's much more thought going into when do we hire and what does that then look like for the future, which is why I think you're seeing it in that kind of fading importance piece. But I definitely think it will come back.
Yeah. So I've interviewed a supply chain officer recently, and he told me, there's kind of a hiring freeze in the sense that, if there is job opening and it can be done by AI, we don't hire a new one.
Yeah. I can see that. And obviously at the leadership level where we operate, there's always going to be a need for senior leaders to help organizations navigate. But certainly in terms of, entry level and mid-level roles that may be quite analytical, data-driven, administrative kind of roles, that's where I definitely see this pause that I think your supply chain director was probably experiencing, which is we need to understand how AI is going to be implemented within organizations, in the next 2 to 3 years, and then what that will mean for which roles we still need human beings for, and where we're going to really invest in human talent, versus which roles actually will be completely or partially replaced with technology.
Yeah. All right. So if you look at the market, so what do you see as the main challenges, Lucy?
Wow, that's the big question. There are so many. I mean, I think the reality is we're just in this period of change. And a conversation I get involved with a lot, though, is I think we need to accept this sense that, and this period of change is going to go on for some time. It's not really got an end date that we can see in sight at the moment. And what's impacting that is both, geopolitical challenges, economic or low levels of economic growth across developed markets, the flows of supply chains around the world, and then obviously technology changes as well. So there are a lot of moving parts that ultimately mean, I think from a leadership perspective, a phrase that I heard, which I think is quite interesting, is, leaders and individuals, all of us, we need to get comfortable with the sense of motion. So leading and working through motion, through moving parts, because I think there's going to be these moving parts for quite some time to come. And as I've said, geopolitical and economic risk, at a macro level, and then, within organizations, within industries and countries, differences around, national infrastructure changing, investing to move towards net zero requires, increasing supply chain capacity in certain markets and moving away from other markets as technology changes, come into play. So I think there's a lot of macro and micro level change. A big focus around risk, both in terms of supply chain continuity and the risks associated with the geopolitical instability. And we've seen some of these issues already with things, like the Red Sea, for example, and having to reroute supply chains. But something certainly very prevalent in the UK, and I hosted a fascinating breakfast on this last week, is also the threat of cyber risk in the supply chain. And there's been some very high profile cases here in the UK in the last 6 months, of leading retailers and leading manufacturers whose businesses have absolutely been paralysed because of a cyber threat that has impacted their ability to operate as a business, and it's highlighted some weaknesses in their supply chain security as a result. So I think that level of risk is really, really important and being built into supply chain. As we've already talked about, technology changes, what that means for us, what that means for people, what that means for the ability and the pace at which organizations can embed technology, and get the benefit from it. I think there's still a lot of talk and not necessarily kind of successful use cases yet for real benefit to come from the adoption of AI and technology. So I think, again, for leaders, how do you storytell, how do you get the investment that you need to invest in the technologies in your supply chain? And then once you've got that investment, how do you embed them? How do you get your people to use these technologies to drive the productivity, efficiency, market insight, customer experience, whatever it might be that you're trying to achieve? So tech is huge. And obviously that's something that leaders need to get their head around in uncertain times, and acknowledging that probably don't have the answers yet, but how do you steer your organizations through all of the noise, whilst you keep running the business at the same time? So a lot of moving parts, I would say, is the current operating environment, and something I suspect that we will be needing to engage and accept for probably the next 5 years or so.
Yeah. So next, these are the findings of our survey we have done recently. So here you see, in the gray chart, the results of this year, 2025, and in orange and in blue in 2022 and 2020 respectively. So we asked supply chain executives, mainly in Europe, a few from North America, but 48 this year. What do you see as the long-term mega trends? And digitalization and technical changes is number one still. Last year it dropped a bit, but remarkable in my opinion is geopolitical realignment and reshoring is up as number 3, so that's growing rapidly. But also the second one, global market expansion and value chains. You have to look for growth basically. So geopolitical is on the rise at number 3. Sustainability, sadly to say, is going down. And what is your view on that, Lucy?
I echo your sentiment, Martin, in terms of it's disappointing to see that it's dropping off of the kind of exco priority list, but I also have to say that it is what I see. So when I'm engaging and speaking with, chief supply chain officers, chief procurement officers, and the clients that hire us to recruit those roles, so CFO, COO, CEO in some cases, the priority, because of the current kind of global economic climate, low growth, high cost that you've alluded to, unfortunately, it has steered attention and efforts away from sustainability to driving more productivity and cost out, or cost mitigation, and shoring up the supply chain from a risk perspective. So yeah, I agree, it's a shame, but I do also echo that that's the sentiment I definitely hear and see, both from the clients that hire us, but equally when I'm speaking to the leadership community. The priorities that they're set by their excos, sustainability has kind of dropped down the list, is what they're telling me. And it becomes more of a doing enough to make sure that they're the right side of any regulation, but certainly probably not going the extra mile where, the charts would show and the data shows they were doing, and it was a leading indicator and leading priority back in 2020 and 2022.
Yeah. So how should leaders operate in this times of uncertainty?
I think clarity is absolutely key. Clarity and consistency of vision, to make sure you're communicating with your people, that they understand their purpose. So why are you doing as a function what you're doing? How does it link to the overall objectives of the organization, so that they can see and feel that kind of route to supporting the overall direction of the company that they work for. So being very clear on where the organization is going, how the supply chain links into that, and the critical contribution that it makes to achieve those overall corporate objectives as part of something bigger rather than something in a silo, and being very clear and consistent with that communication, particularly when there are so many shocks to the system that we keep on experiencing. And I think that's probably the most important thing, from a leadership perspective, is accessibility, communication, clarity and consistency of vision. And I think a trait that is super important, that I think means a lot to people when they see and work with their leaders, is that kind of transparency and honesty, and the ability to show vulnerability, and the ability to accept that you may be the leader, but you don't have all the answers, and that's okay. And actually demonstrating that you're vulnerable at times too, and not being afraid to ask for help, whether that's internal help, external help from peers or external advisors. So those would be the key areas of focus I would suggest in terms of how leaders come through successfully leading their teams in times of uncertainty and change.
So you mentioned here a podcast. Is it a podcast you are doing, or should a leader do a podcast internally?
I think it's, again, that's part of communication. So communicate using all different forms of technology with your people, particularly if you're operating globally with people in different markets on different time zones. Take the opportunity to communicate through podcasts, through blogs, through all of the technology tools available to you.
Yeah, so we'll talk about later also on the top 28, because one of the parts of our ranking is visible. How visible are you, and how do you communicate with your peers internally and externally? And by the way, I know Maria Pia de Caro. She is Chief Supply Chain Officer of Pernod Ricard. She was on our Innovate Supply Chain event earlier this year. And she told on stage that, every Friday going by train from Paris to Brussels, she's thinking about her last week, and she's taping a short video, and she sent it out on TikTok. So basically, she's giving a recap of her week to her whole supply chain colleagues all around the world. So basically, that's and it's kind of a podcast, but that gives her accessibility, and she will point out what she has seen. And by the way,
I mean, that's fantastic, and I think that's a brilliant way to communicate consistently as well with your team. But don't forget, supply chain leaders really are coordinating a system, both an internal system and an external one. So I think that communication maybe not at that level of cadence, and clearly not, being very mindful of what you're sharing, particularly if it's public. But communicating to your supply base through your partners so that they have a clear understanding of your vision, your objectives, your values, and how they are also contributing to that direction. So, it was I mentioned the panel we had here last week for cyber threats within the supply chain, and one of the leaders from Microsoft used the term system, and we should be thinking about systems as opposed to chains, supply chains, because there are so many players in the systems in which we're trying to operate. So I think having that systems mindset, systems level leadership, both internally within your business and externally into the supply chain, and even potentially with competitors or peers, is the mindset to lead with.
Yeah, in the last few years, I created a lot of business ecosystem and supply chain ecosystem visualization. So basically, you map out all your stakeholders. So not only your linear supply chain, but also your other stakeholders. That could be NGOs, banks, investors, but also contract manufacturers, freight forwarders, you name it. And be clear about them, how to involve them in your communication. So that's clear. Yeah. I mentioned. So another thing, what we did in our survey, we asked, we asked what are the mega trends for the long term? What are they right now? What is on the boardroom agenda right now? And now you see business transformation, digitalization is number one. Cost containment is number two. Portfolio optimization, also quite sensible to do, is number three. The supply chain risk management is going down, dropping. My sense is, and maybe that's also relating to the matrix we've seen earlier, I think leaders have the sense they have it under control. And even, sadly to say, sustainability is even dropping off further right now.
We have short memories, don't we? It just will take one supply chain event, one risk event, one geopolitical event, or a climate event, and that will shoot back up again.
Yeah, so, but do you also see that, cost containment number two, and the portfolio optimization and customer excellence number three?
Yeah, I would agree with that. I mean, in every function and every senior leadership role, the digitization piece and the business transformation is the hot topic. It's the one that comes to mind first. But absolutely, I think operational excellence, cost containment. Yeah, that's the commercial number one priority. And I think that obviously one's driving productivity, one is driving cost out. And likewise, portfolio optimization, similar thing is what I'm reading there. It's like leveraging across your portfolio, whether that's a multinational conglomerate or whether that's a private equity fund with multiple portfolio companies, under their investment portfolio. So those are the priorities as I see them with the clients that I work with.
So the supply chain risk management and business continuity in the UK, you have some incidents with Marks and Spencers and Jaguar Land Rover on cyber threats, etc. So I think that if you ask this in the UK, you will probably see a different kind of answers.
I think you will, but not massively. But I think you might just see a higher focus around business continuity and cyber risk than you will do in organisations or countries that haven't been hit as some of our leading companies have in the last 6 months. But like, as I mentioned, I know I said kind of people have a short memory. These things tend to come and go. It tends to be a high focus, of the moment conversation, and then 3 or 6 months later it's back to business as usual if it didn't happen to you. But I think on some of these things, risks, general supply chain risks and cyber risk, we are in an age of it is a matter of when and not if. So I think it's very risky for organizations to not take supply chain risk and cyber risk seriously, disruptions to their organization or to their key or to anyone in their supply chain actually that ultimately will disrupt their business. I think it's it's going to be, that's a risk in itself if you don't take that seriously.
Yeah. So we didn't cross the results yet, because we also did a self-assessment on maturity on supply chain matters. So 1 out of 5 is still interested and focusing on talent and change management. So 1 out of 5 has this as one of the main 2 topics in the boardroom right now. So they are in a transformation, I would say. So that so 1 out of 5, I have to check if they are the leading or the lagging executives of companies. But it's still on their mind. This is an interesting thing about movement. You said maybe you can elaborate a bit more on that.
Yeah, sure. I've taken the Weeble analogy from a presentation that I was somebody else gave, and I just thought it was very apt. So a Weeble is like a circular shaped object, as you can see in the picture, and it just moves. It never falls over, but it wobbles. And I think that's the reality of how leaders need to operate today in the environment in which we're operating. It's constantly moving. You need to constantly move with it to keep your balance, but not fall down, essentially. So I think it's just an interesting analogy. Leadership needs to be consistent, as I've said, very clear, clarity of vision, clarity of communication, in terms of the direction of travel of the organization, and then what's happening within the supply chain. And I think leaders need to, again, clients, one of the key traits that is attractive to organizations to either promote from within or to hire from outside, look for leaders with curiosity. And I think everybody is talking about AI and agentic AI and what it's going to do, and I've not met anybody yet that knows what the answer is going to be, but it's important that leaders are curious about learning, curious about taking in new information, understanding the players in the system in which they operate, to show that they are engaging and they, as much as they can form opinions, have ideas, and have a network of individuals and companies they can link into to be able to have an informed decision and an informed opinion on these things. So I think it's, again, important to continually network. Events like this, Martijn, your survey, round tables, are super important to be able to gauge where you are versus the external market, where you are versus best practice or things that different people are trying, because the role of supply chain leaders is about bringing the outside in. That means you have to have an external view and then adapt that view to the needs of your own organization. And as they manage that ecosystem of relationships and be able to pick up the phone, go to meetings, have a look and a feel at things in terms of in other environments that might be suitable to bring into your own, and share those insights, learn things early, try things early, fail fast, share the learnings and move on. And I think that's how you keep your balance whilst everything around you is moving.
Yeah, I've got a question from the audience. How would you explain such a low focus on change management in the previous slide, with such a high focus on transformation? Can you explain that?
I haven't seen the, I can't, if I'm really honest. I can try. I think, I don't know what the questions were asked to kind of pull out that kind of data, but I don't think you can have transformation without strong change management. In fact, you can't. Because if you're trying to transform something, and actually I think everyone probably on this call will have experiences of failed transformations and failed implementations of new systems, new technologies, new ways of working, because the change management process was poor. So I don't think you can have a successful transformation without strong change management.
Yeah. And maybe the board is talking about business transformation, operating models, etc. And then supply chain leaders have to execute on that, and then they realize they need talent and change managers to do all that. So basically, maybe that's. But I have to look in the data. How do individuals answer these questions, and is it done in a logical way or not? So, but that's the thing. Another thing you mentioned, we ask also executive, what do you think important as a supply chain leader for the future? And what would you like to develop? And here you see in blue what's important, leadership and people skills. And number 2, strategic and decision-making skills as an important trait. But then they will ask, what would you like to develop personally? And then that's remarkable. Technology and digital acumen is well down below. Might be not so important, but they really want to develop it. So we ask, name 2. So this is how they have answers. If you look at this, what is remarkable in your opinion? And I also highlighted in pink the more soft skills.
Oh, well, I think it's great that there's a recognition that even in a high-tech era that we're in, leadership and people skills have come through really strongly. And again, I'm sure we've all been in conferences and conversations around technology where the conclusion is it's even more about people now than it probably ever has been, with the emergence of all these new technologies, because tech is great, but it needs interpretation and analytical insight to then be able to draw conclusions. So I think that's where the strategic decision making skills piece comes in, that ability to take insights from what technology is enabling you to do and then lead your people. And I'm not surprised by, technology and digital acumen is something where we all need to develop, because essentially we're being given a new set of tools to work with that we're not familiar with. So whilst they might be ultimately quite tactical in what we end up using them for, which is why maybe over the long term they're not going to be seen as important as leadership skills and strategic and decision making, it's kind of a foundational skill that we all need to develop, because there's going to be a new kind of foundation level of tools that we will be working with going forward. So I think that's what I'm reading into this set of results here.
Sander, you have a lot of conversations with executives who want to apply AI in supply chain. If you look at this, do you recognize this, that the leaders would need to have some training what AI can do?
Yeah, I think I can quite well underwrite what Lucy just said there. So I think what they see is that there's, well, very big potential still. And when we look at the past year, there's not seem to be one real big breakthrough that leads to huge transformation projects just on AI. So I can understand that leaders want to understand better what can we do with these new set of tools, how can we use them, but also how do I need to lead my organization to be one step ahead of the competition, for instance.
Yeah, and I think there's still much to learn about the global and the sustainability mindset down below, so there is still hope. So Lucy, to wrap up your part, so you mentioned that you have done a mentoring program. Maybe you can explain a bit more about that.
Yeah, sure. Thank you. So we've run it for 3 years now, and essentially it's about it's specifically focused on future female leaders, and ensuring that level of representation continues to grow. So what we've done is chosen about 14 or 15 chief procurement and chief supply chain officers. Doesn't matter whether they're male or female, they're in the leadership level role, and ask them to nominate into the programme a -2 level female that they believe has the genuine talent to continue on an upward trajectory and ultimately become a chief supply chain or a chief procurement officer in the medium term. And they've done that, and then what we have done is we have matched those mentees with a mentor from a different organisation. So essentially we swap people around out of that group, so you are mentored by a leader outside of your organisation, and the programme runs for a year. We make the introductions, we make the connections, we give people some background on each other so they're not blind going into those early meetings, and then we check in with them through the course of the programme, both mentor and mentee. And I said we've run this for three cohorts now, and it's been hugely successful, brilliant feedbacks, really grateful to the leaders that give their time, and really grateful to the mentees who invest their time in the programme. And as you can see on this slide, we've had fantastic feedback from both mentors and mentees who have found the programme enlightening. So it's a little bit of reverse mentoring as well, I guess, in there. And I think the fact that it's with somebody from outside of their organisation gives an extra layer of freedom, maybe a little bit more honesty on both sides potentially, because they're not connected to each other within the same company. Mm-hmm. And the feedback has been fantastic, as you can see. So I think, as well as being a leader within your own organisation, it's really important to support and feed those generations underneath you coming through. So whether you can get involved in setting up mentoring within your own company, or get involved in one that's at an industry level, for example, I think it's hugely inspiring. And the common themes coming through from our mentees, were, it was great to know that these senior leaders had the same self-doubt, asked themselves the same questions, had to make the same decisions that I'm making, and it just made people feel much more confident going forward about how to manage their own career, how to push themselves forward, how to make decisions, how to have potentially difficult conversations. So a hugely rewarding programme.
Yeah, and getting back to the initial matrix we have shown at the start, uncertainty, even on a higher level, these executives, they are humans. They feel a lot of times also uncertain about all kind of things.
Exactly, and I think it's important to show that. Oh, clearly, you still, you've got a lead at the end of the day.
Yeah.
But I think, being your authentic self, and also showing some of those at times of self-doubt, or when you've reflected on maybe did you make the right decision in a particular scenario, and sharing that experience with people coming behind you is hugely valuable to the next generation.
Yeah. So where have you done this? Just in the UK or across Europe?
No, it was across Europe. So we've just closed our third program, and it's done virtually. Obviously, with the people in different locations and different time zones, it's difficult to make it face to face. Some of them, where they have both mentor and mentee been in the UK or been in the same country, they have arranged to meet each other face to face. And that's worked really well. But equally, where it's been a virtual relationship, that's been very valuable to both parties. And as I say, mentors have found it valuable to be reminded of some of the questions, the challenges, the concerns, the self-doubt, the choices, the challenges of being earlier in your career and maybe raising a young family at the same time as trying to build your career. For some of our leaders, those are periods of their life that were maybe 20 years ago. So it's helpful, they found it helpful to be reminded that people that they are leading today are facing some of these challenges. And we closed the program after 12 months, so it just runs for a year. But clearly beyond that, mentor and mentee are very welcome, and they do, to continue to stay in touch without our involvement.
So we have done an event several times, also pre-COVID, in Amsterdam on International Women's Day. Maybe we should do something similar in Amsterdam and get these people face-to-face together so they can meet in real life. And maybe that's an idea.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, all right. So now we talking about Europe, and we talk about the top 28, and we'll talk about leadership and also some other things. So let me explain. IG&H has helped us in the last few years to create this top 28, doing the analytics. So maybe Sander, you can explain briefly about IG&H, and then we move on to the top 28.
Yeah, absolutely. Because besides partner of Martijn in the top 28, we are a consultancy and technology firm. We specialize in digital transformations, and we do that for companies in retail, in FMCG, industry, logistics, but also financial services and healthcare. We are from origin a boutique consultancy firm from Utrecht in the Netherlands, specializing in strategy, but we've grown in the past decades with experts on data and IT, low code, and transformation. And next to that, we partner now also with a selection of technologies to provide end-to-end solutions for our clients. So that would be RELX, for instance, Microsoft and our systems. RELX, of course, as forecasting and replenishment solution. And we see Microsoft and our systems often as a platform for AI tools, functionality on top of traditional ERP and WMS systems. And I would say our strength lies in combining really over 30 years of industry experience with technology, which enables us not only to design strategies, but also implement them successfully. And as our slogan is, we make strategy work.
Right. Yeah, and you see a lot of logos on the upper right side. Even the bigger companies, DD Peet's, Unilever, and Heinz, but also mid-sized companies, retailers, household names in the Netherlands and the Benelux. So that these are well-known names. So maybe you can explain, what kind of things you're doing, and then we get to the top 28.
Yeah. Absolutely. Like we discussed also, Martijn, the consultancy industry is, of course, also not standing still. And whereas a few years ago, it would be sufficient to really only provide strategic advice and very smart analysis, we see that our clients now demand more and more. So we've expanded our strategy with also building our own solutions, designing them for clients, but also helping our customers adopt it. So, for instance, the change management that we discussed earlier, we do see it very important indeed in transformation projects, and we help our clients with that. And we're even able to support once the solutions are live. So with that, we believe we really turn into an end-to-end partner for our clients.
So, and I connected with you because you have quite a few data scientists, and that can help us with the analysis we've been doing. So we started out our top 28 supply chain executive Europe in 2015. So it's 10 years old. Why top 28? Because 10 years ago we used to have 28 countries in Europe, and now we're missing out someone. So that's
Who's that?
Yeah. That's the reason why we have top 28, and people will remember top 28 better than top 30. So that's basically why we've done it. So basically, this top 28 is based on 4 quadrants. It's on financials. That's number 1, 30% weight. Personal responsibility of supply chain executives. We'll talk about later. And the third one is 20% is the personal visibility. Is he or she very visible to the outside world? And last but not least, 20% is the peer voting, and we ask recruiters, headhunters, to do an assessment of their view on the leadership skills of supply chain executives on the long list or the short list. Maybe you can lead us through the methodology, Sander.
Yeah, because it's quite an extensive process to come to the top 28. So we always start with a very long list of supply chain executives. I think it's 180 at least. I think it's even more, Martijn, who are in potential able to get to the top 28. And as a first separation criteria, we really look at the visibility of the executives, and that really determines, okay, how is the shortlist look like? Which people separate the good from the better. And based on that, we analyze financials, we analyze, okay, their personal responsibility, what's their scope, what's their span, to come to the top 28. And then we come to ultimately also a ranking on who we believe is the best supply chain executive in Europe.
Yeah, and the final part in the top 10, we ask headhunters like Lucy to give some feedback, but also we ask the ones on the top 28 some achievements. What have you done lately? And then we get a better feeling what kind of project have they done and that kind of stuff. So we get a better picture of the leadership skills and their achievements. More a bit on the data scientist part. How did you do that? All that?
Yeah, so we assessed the whole long list, and then we used AI actually to first of all scrape online. So we try to collect as much financial data that is available online. But we also automated a Google search and a LinkedIn search, and then we also used Gen AI to qualify. Okay, this person we found it on Google. Is this a post? Is this a webinar? Is this a podcast this person is included in, to assess the visibility of this executive. So I think there we really make use of AI in order to get to a data substantiated top 28 there, Martijn.
Yeah. So basically, to be qualified for this ranking, you have a minimum turnover of 5 billion euros worldwide. You have to have a spread of functionality and responsibilities, and actually the visibility part is the qualifier. So maybe there's a excellent supply chain executive somewhere around with excellent financial performance, but if he or she is not visible to the outside world, we don't know about him or her. So he or she won't be on the long list. So basically, you have to be visible, and like Lucy mentioned, you don't only have to be visible internally for your whole leadership team and for all your supply chain colleagues, but also to the outside world, to your suppliers, to all the stakeholders in your ecosystem. So basically, that's the qualifier of all this. So I had a call from a supply chain executive from a well-known company a few years ago. How to get into this top 28? So give me the opportunity to do an interview with you. You are more visible by that, and then then the snowball gets rolling. All right. We go through the top 28 briefly because there are top 28 that I can talk for hours. So this is the first one to enter. Roland Byers of Hilti, setting up a customer hub and order to pay. That was excellent. Gregor Dudek from Electrolux. He has been doing a lot of stuff in IBP and creating a global data hub as a base for AI. Paula Davila Martinez from Kenview, She did an excellent job with the spin-off of J&J division, and make sure that she has dual and multiple sourcing. Torsten Domke is the VP Supply Chain of Infineon. He is in the semiconductor industry, and if you followed Nexperia, he is in a challenging time, and they have done remarkably well to pivot also for their customers. So next, 24, Jamal Shamaric, Esther Lauder, has done a lot of AI to create real-time shipments, 20% scope 3 reduction since 2018, and they have been local producing for 75% in the region of EMEA. So that's what he's done lately. Alexander Bobert Schindler, manufacturer of elevators. He has integrated the whole supply chain from design to deliver, and that has created a lot of resilience and efficiency. Willem Mutsers, he is a CPO and CEO of Givaudan in the flavor business, and strong financial performance in the last few years, and also a lot of improvement in sustainability. Arne Fleming, he is head of corporate supply chain management at Bosch. He is also integrating AI in a digital environment to create resilience and to create scale. That has already saved 300 million out of all this in efficiency. Robert van der Waal, VP Supply Chain of Senvec, in the mining environment, end-to-end supply chain responsible, 50 warehouses all over the world, has improved stock availability and on-time delivery, and has created 6 global hubs, and he makes sure that the lead times have been shortened dramatically. Novo Nordisk was number 9, Andrew Finnegan, and now 19. Basically, he did a great job with Ozempic and the growth, but basically the last year there have been a bit of a turmoil in that field, and they lost the competition to Pfizer. Number 18, Carlsberg, Viktor Shvetsov. He created a Carlsberg Supply Chain Academy, and out of that, in the last few years, he has saved $1 billion on cost efficiencies. Number 17, Jean-Luc Goual. He's executive at Thales, defense industry. Well, they are going through a massive growth lately because of the investment of European countries into defense industry, radar technology, for example. And you see a massive growth, and they have to scale up with their radar machines they are creating. So next, Sander, maybe you can comment on this. So we have a comparison between Siemens and Thales.
Yeah, so I think we show here 2 industrial giants next to each other, and we compare stock turnover or inventory turnover to profitability, so the EBIT. I think what stands out here is that Siemens seems to be performing a bit better on margin as compared to the past year, but is actually extremely stable on stock turn. And Thales, on the other hand, has, I think logically also in a market that is growing, reduced a bit in terms of profitability. We believe that's mainly due to investing in the growth that they see over the coming years, but we will expect that they will catch up, perhaps not next year, but shortly after.
All right. Moving on, number 16, Fred Brut. He's Merck Sharp & Dohme, the American one, pharma. Did a lot, created an end-to-end control tower, even included blockchain, and a massive improvement on the visibility part. Number 15, David Cutter, Friesen Campina, in the dairy business. Difficult business, but they are really good at valorization of their milk. And basically, he's a big supporter of IBP, and even CEO is supporting IBP. So the CEO of Friesen Campina is asking for IBP figures from David, and that's a good thing that IBP is really supported by the CEO. Silke Maurer, Mr. K, CEO of MTU Aero Engines, so supplier of Airbus, strong financial performance in a challenging market with a lot of technical disruptions. Number 13, Björn Neil Kirchner from Henkel Adhesives, B2B environment, created a center of excellence and centralizing a lot of data to create strong performance. especially because they are a big supplier in automotive, but they are able to pivot in a large sense. Sander, if you compared Henkel to Ecolab, they make sanitation stuff in the B2B.
Yeah, so we see Henkel at place 13, I believe, and part of that place is mainly earned due to a very good increase in profitability over the past year. Ecolab, on the other hand, has also shown an improvement on stock turn. And well, without giving too much away, Martijn, but I think that also might be reflected in the place on the ranking.
Yes. Yeah, basically, when you look at this graph, you want to be in the upper right part. So from the lower left to the upper right, that's what the trajectory you want to have. Yeah. Next, and this is a good thing, 3 women. So luckily there are women in the top 28, and that's good to see. Newcomer on number 12, Danone, Vikram Agarwal from Danone as COO. Massive financial improvement and a big support of IBP. So IBP is really delivering financial results for Danone. Gisela Linge, is it? I missed the knee. It's my fault. VP Logistics of Autoliv is a producer of airbags. So she has been in the job 2023. She's a very enthusiastic digital executive in the sense that she believes streamlining process, making digital available to all their colleagues, to make sure that you have data-driven and rapid decisions. Number 10, also in automotive, Volvo Cars, Francesca Gamboni. In the past, he worked at Renault and Stellantis. She's been working at Volvo Cars since 2024. And she's outperforming in automotive, and that is very curious to see that German automotive is lagging behind, and Volvo Cars, maybe because they have Chinese parents, they are doing very well, and Francesca Gamboni is supporting all that. Earlier mentioned Maria Pia De Caro, EVP and Chief Supply Chain Officer of Pernod Ricard. She's a very enthusiastic woman, and she believes in global, regional, and local production and make sure where to do what. And she wants to have a digital ability all around their colleagues. Strong performance. Number 8, Ellen Dye, Novartis. That's the best financial performance this year. So basically coming up from 25 to 8. So that's his fortune. Leonard D'Souza, out of nowhere, newcomer, number 7, and basically that's a financial performance, leading 60 factories, 200 DCs all around the world, and has steadily process improvement and created a lot of value. David Boulanger, number 6, coming from 2, also in the dairy foods. Basically, that's strong performance, but difficulty in this difficult market with the lower prices in milk. But then again, a lot of effort on sustainability, even applying hydrogen and thermal energy to get a neutral, carbon neutral environment. Sven Market, number 5, from Siemens. Like we've seen earlier, also strong performance, a lot of effort creating a smart infrastructure for all their factories. And that's why he has come on number 5. The Hall of Fame. So we have doing this since 2015. Before that, also Pierre Francesca from Unilever was on number 1, and these are the ones of last year. So getting to the final 4, Willem Uyen, Chief Supply Chain and Operation Officer of Unilever, officially in this role 2025, but before that also involved in the supply chain. And basically, he has made the spin-off of the ice cream division successfully, and meanwhile maintaining momentum in a challenging CPG market. So that's leading him to number 4. Now in the final part, Sander, L'Oreal versus Coty.
Yeah, so we combine 2 luxury good producers. So automatically we see a lower stock turnover than we've seen previously. If we look at the margins, then they are quite neat for both companies. And especially Coty very stable, with a slight increase in stock turn over the last years. I mean, if you look at the overall scoring, Martijn, of the ranking, then we also take into account factors of the past years. So that might why we don't see Coty so high in the ranking this year.
Well, not so high. You see him on number 3. So that, that's relatively high. So Graham Cartman did a good job in the last few years. They made a strategic transformation in the last 4 or 5 years, and he is heavily responsible for all that. And what's remarkable, the average lead time into the factories cut by 30% to less than 80 days, and that for their business is quite remarkable. And not so remarkable, L'Oreal, very steady financial performance, and well, yeah, we have seen it before that he has done a great job. He's been in the job COO since 2021, and a lot of positive recommendation from other peers I've heard. Sander, Coca-Cola versus Carlsberg.
Yeah, so the beverage market, which is, well, quite difficult market, I believe, a lot of pressure on prices. And if I look at these two graphs, it seems that we have two companies that chosen a different approach over the past year, where Coca-Cola seems to have really taken the competition head on of more B brands, perhaps also playing the price game, which led to a small reduction in EBIT percentage, but at the same time have their inventory turnover increased, so they might still have a good market share, which sets them up for the success over the upcoming years. Whereas we see the opposite for Carlsberg, so they seem to have improved their EBIT percentage, but at the same time their inventory turnover has reduced slightly. So I'm very curious also what that's going to mean in the next few years, how this trend continues.
So number 1 is Jose Antonio Echeverria. He is Chief Customer Service and Supply Chain Officer at Coca-Cola Europe Pacific Partners. And basically, he's responsible for the growth of Coca-Cola Europe Pacific Partners. So he's responsible for Europe and Asia. And he has led the expansion into Australia and the Philippines. And yeah, he is a true facilitator of business growth that we've seen in the figures, but also in other things. What you see when you talk to colleagues, and another thing, this business growth has also given opportunities to create a factory in France for returnable glass, and basically a lot of robotization and AI has been in place in this new facility. So creating growth give you also the opportunity to do all kind of other good things like robotization and AI. All right, to wrap it up. So this is something we have published in our current magazine, reverse mentoring. We've seen reverse mentoring being done by Mars and Estée Lauder. Basically, supply chain leaders are being mentored on a quarterly basis on specific topic by a younger generation. So basically, like we've seen here, younger generation explaining to the elderly executives what is a digital twin and how do AI agents really work and apply in our business. So that's one thing. And the good thing is it keeps leaders young at heart. That's what we hear from supply chain executives being involved in all this, and it gives also opportunity to talents to show what they're doing. Final thing, what we developed is a mission command leadership checklist. So how do you cope in a VUCA world? So basically, this has been trained by NATO, by military forces. Define a clear-cut mission, like Lucy said earlier. So what is your dot on the horizon? Create a framework and ensure your colleagues that the conditions are clear and let them decide on their own. Give them freedom to decide how to achieve the objectives within that framework. Lucy, do you recognize this? Is it the way forward? Is it a new way of leadership?
I'm not sure it's a new way. I think it's the best way. And what this slide, particularly that last point, reminds me of, when I take references on candidates from their previous or current bosses, one of the questions that I ask is, what advice would you give their new leader in terms of how to manage them so that they thrive and that you get the best performance from them? And pretty much without exception, that last bullet point is what they say. Let them go, give them very clear direction, give them the insight to how, the early days of how to navigate the organization that they're joining, but then let them go. Do not micromanage them, check in regularly, but leave them to it so that they can be successful. So I would just agree wholeheartedly with what this slide says.
Okay, and an interesting thing, when you look at the slide, give everybody the opportunity to speak. So in NATO, it's also, Estonia, small country, but they are expert on cybersecurity. Let even all countries speak. And I think, in a supply chain leadership team or any team, give everybody the floor and the voice, and let everybody be heard.
I completely agree, and that's not just about job titles or roles, but levels, people that might be more early in their career. It's not just up to the senior people to have an opinion. So I think that's about inclusive leadership. Make sure that everybody around the table gets the opportunity to be brought into the conversation. Otherwise, it's always the same louder voices that tend to dominate.
So thanks. So we're running out of time. So unfortunately, we don't have time for Q&A. But the good news is, if you really want to talk to one of us or all three of us, we will be there right after this at table 1 in the virtual lounge. So sit down, and a kind of Zoom meeting will open up in this environment. Like I said, we have a checklist created. You can download. Lucy has written an interesting blog about leadership for sustainable supply chain future in these turbulent times. And together with the IG&H, we created a roadmap for Gen AI and supply chain. So what to do in which phase. With this, I would like to thank you, Lucy. Thank you for your opinion in this webinar.
Thank you for having me.
And Sander, thank you for joining us, and thank you for all the work you have done with the Top 28.
Absolutely happy to help, Martijn.
And the audience, thank you for joining us, either live or in the recording. Thank you for watching. And for next year, we will have a whole agenda for all kinds of events on live, on location, but also a lot of webinars. And we have a whole agenda already available. So join us later on next year. And I hope to see you again. And maybe if you want to join us in the virtual lounge right after this, we'll be there. If not, I wish you a nice Christmas holiday and a Happy New Year, and I see you later. Thank you. Bye-bye.